Welcome back in, everybody. Hope you're doing well. I've been out working and making some money over the past 3 weeks. I'm back in now, ready to talk some more Chiefs football. Hope you're doing good. Yes, I've got my doors open to my studio today so you can see the glare. Someday I'm going to have a nice professional studio, but today is not that day. We are talking about the defensive line. We are talking about Jarran Reed. We are talking about Frank Clark. We are talking about Chris Jones. And this is right in between kind of that gray area between free agency, the highlights of the free agency period, and between the NFL draft. So it's an incomplete picture. We know Kansas City is going to keep working on the defensive line and every position group all the way leading up to the start of the season. But this is what we've got so far, and this is what we're going to talk about with what we've got so far. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Kansas City doesn't use at least one draft pick on the defensive line, especially the defensive end position. I think that would be a smart thing to do. But the draft is always, every single season, kind of a Wild West shootout, right? You never know once you get outside the top 10 or 20 picks who's even going to be there by the time it's your turn to pick. Certainly by the time you get to the second round, it's so unpredictable. The guys that you liked at defensive ends who you thought might be there when it was your turn to pick might be gone by the time your pick comes around. So, yes, I'm sure they're thinking about it, but there's so many things that can happen. You've got 31 other teams picking and trading and choosing. So we'll see if they actually get to pick a defensive end in the NFL draft that they like or not. We'll see about that. But here's what we've got so far today. I want to focus first on Jarran Reed. You know, when I made a video a month ago talking about the defensive line, I talked about how heavy and how stacked they already were at defensive tackle. And I talked about if you brought back Mike Pennell for $1.5 million, that would basically give you a very, very deep defensive tackle position because you already had Chris Jones, the all-world pass rusher, Derek Nottie, Kalen Saunders, and Wharton there at defensive tackle, and talked about how you were actually pretty light there at defensive end. And Brett Veach even himself talked about getting another pass rusher out there at defensive end. That hasn't happened yet. What they've done now is moved over to defensive tackle and picked up Jarran Reed here from the Seattle Seahawks. The latest number I heard on him was 1 year, $7 million. Now, sometimes the financial numbers that you hear during the first few days are not the actual financial numbers. For instance, I was hearing numbers on Mike Remmers when he was first signed again by the Chiefs that were completely inaccurate. It was 3 or 4 days before we actually found out what the actual numbers were. But the numbers I'm hearing right now for Jarran Reed is 1 year and $7 million. It puzzled me at first because I thought to myself, well, they're already pretty stacked at defensive tackle and they're kind of thin at defensive end, and here they are signing another defensive tackle. So I want to talk about that today because the more I looked at it, the more I absolutely love it. And I've studied all the film on Jarran Reed from 2020, and we've looked at him, and I really, really, really like the addition. I think this may be the best real upgrade that they've done to the defensive line in 2 or 3 off seasons. Yes, even including the Frank Clark deal by the time you look at everything all the way around. Okay, so Jarran Reed, he played on defensive tackle and defensive end for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, in my opinion, after breaking down all the film, I don't think Kansas City should be trying to move him out to defensive end. It's not his best position by far. He is actually much better when he plays defensive tackle right here and when he's attacking one of these A gaps. Most of you already know this better than I do, but the A gaps are right here. So if we assume, and I think rightly so, that Chris Jones is going to be at one of the defensive tackle positions, that basically leaves Wharton, Saunders, Nottie, and Jarran Reed fighting for playing time over the other defensive tackle position, unless they just take Chris Jones out on running downs because they want to keep him fresh for passing downs. So by and large, though, Chris Jones is going to dominate about 800 of these snaps at one defensive tackle spot, which means you've got about 1,200 to 1,300 other snaps to be filled by these other guys at defensive tackle. But Jarran Reed, back to the point here, is actually by far a better player when he's playing defensive tackle. And this is the reason why. Because, again, I don't want to create confusion here, he did play defensive end. He didn't play the wide end, but he did play defensive end in Seattle quite a bit. But he is much better at defensive tackle, and for this reason, he's tipping the scales at over 300 pounds. He's a large player. When he gets going in one direction, straight line, right here, A gap to the quarterback, and this is important. When he's going in one direction, he is almost impossible to stop. He is like kind of a volcano where the lava is just slowly going down the mountain and there's no way to push it back. That's kind of what he is. He's not as fast as, say, Aaron Donald. His first step is not as quick as Chris Jones. His moves aren't as good as, say, Fletcher Cox. He's not that kind of a player. But he is still very effective at getting pressure on the quarterback from this position right here because he is so strong and because he has so much weight. When he gets going in the straight line, and he gets double teamed all the time. You can see it play after play after play in Seattle. Jarran Reed receives double teams almost not every single play, but on most plays he gets double teamed when he's here in this position attacking either one of the A gaps, and he has a straight line to the quarterback. Now, excuse me, he will almost never be the first guy to the quarterback. He's just not the quick twitch rusher that Jones or Cox or Aaron Donald are. He's not that guy. But he will very often be the second or third guy to the quarterback. And even if he never actually gets hands on the quarterback, and sometimes he doesn't, there's just an immense amount of pressure here coming up the middle when Jarran Reed is playing the defensive tackle spot. Even when he's getting double teamed by both the guard and center, which happens a lot, he still gets quite a push right here. And so he's not going to be the guy who just, bam, every single play is just getting immense pressure on the quarterback. He's the first guy there. But it's not unusual for him to be the second guy there. And even if he actually can't get a straight pass to the quarterback, he's just pushing the offensive lineman back. And you can see this. And by the way, I encourage you to get, if you can afford it, I can encourage you to get all 22 NFL Game Pass. It's awesome. I love it. I get to spend a ton of time on there. It's a lot of fun just getting to break down these plays and getting to see these things. And it's not that expensive, but I know some of you are tight on money. Maybe if you've got a birthday or Christmas coming up, you tell your wife or your girlfriend or your husband or whoever, your son or daughter or your parents, hey, I want this for my present. It's not super expensive, but I know some of you guys are tight on money anyway, like I have been at times in the past too. Love it. You can actually break down all of this stuff, get done all the games. When the games are over, you get the access to them immediately. A day or two later, you get the NFL coaches film. But it's fantastic. You can just see, though, the amount of pressure that Jarran Reed gets up the middle here. He'll actually very often take both the guard and the center and push them back into the quarterback. And what that does, and it's so important, even if he doesn't get a lot of sacks, it just puts pressure on the quarterback that he cannot have that free open pocket the way he wants it. He's just not free, and he can't step into his throws the way he would like. And you can imagine when paired with Chris Jones, which, by the way, Chris Jones gets double teamed every down of every play that he ever steps in the football field and frequently gets triple teamed. I shouldn't say frequently, but occasionally gets even triple teamed. Chris Jones, the reason that he does not get as many sacks as he used to is simply because he gets so much attention from the offensive line. They game plan for him, they block against him, they double team him, they triple team him, they run plays away from him. Chris Jones is as good as he has ever been at putting pressure on the quarterback. He just gets more attention. And there's really nobody else on the defensive line for Kansas City right now to take that attention away. And we'll talk about that in a second because I know what some of you might be questioning on that. But for Chris Jones, he gets an immense amount of pressure on the quarterback. His moves are great. His first step is great. But offenses are planning for that. And so, this is not unusual to see teams do the same thing to, like, J.J. Watt, for instance. They run a lot of plays just flat away from J.J. Watt all the time. And you'll see the teams do the same thing against the Kansas City Chiefs. They'll either double or triple team Chris Jones, or they'll just run the plays all away from him, or they'll just try to unload the football before Chris Jones can get there. So Chris Jones is as good as he has ever been, and he is outstanding at getting pressure on the quarterback or at diverting so much attention from the offensive line that it should, in theory, open up doors for other players to do that. That doesn't always happen, but Chris Jones is just all world at getting to the quarterback or at diverting so much attention from the offensive line that they have to use 2 or 3 blockers or They just run the play completely away from Chris Jones when they're passing the football at all. So Chris Jones, you can imagine here getting a lot of pressure, and when you mix in Jarran Reed at the defensive tackle position, you're getting tons and tons of pressure, just enormous pressure right here up the middle from these two defensive tackles. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. Jarran Reed played a lot of defensive end in Seattle, but he just wasn't as good, and here's why. He never played this outside edge, but right here on the B gaps, a lot of times he would play that. It's an indirect pass to the quarterback. It's farther to the quarterback, and it's at an angle. And the at the angle thing, it's where it's really important. A lot of times in the NFL, bigger running backs, we talk about it, bigger running backs, as long as they're moving forward, they're going to keep moving forward. And even if you tackle them, they're going to fall forward. But for some of those bigger running backs, if you get them moving off to the side, away from that north-south and more to the east-west directions, you can get them to kind of fall over or just kind of run out of steam. The same thing is true of Jarran Reed here at defensive end. When he slips out here, he's still good against the run. He's very good against the run. He's solid against the run, but he's nowhere near as good when he's playing defensive end at getting to the quarterback, okay? And that's where it really starts to get kind of tricky. When you see him slip out here, it's an indirect angle. He cannot seem to get the motion out there to the quarterback. And guys are more easily able with their hands, and it's usually a tackle, to kind of spin him around because he's already at an angle. He's got so much body mass and so much strength. He's not quick enough to actually get around those guys usually. It's usually his strength or a move that he's got that's getting him past. But because of that angle, they're able to turn him, and basically all of his momentum that he carries forward right here at defensive tackle, it goes away when he's playing that defensive end because he's at an angle trying to get at the quarterback. And it's like he just kind of loses all of that steam and all of that north-south momentum that he has. So if Kansas City, and I'm sure they will on running downs, I wouldn't mind at all if you kick out Jarran Reed to defensive end and you bring in Derek Nottie at defensive tackle for running downs. I think that's very smart. But on passing downs, any long distance downs or any kind of a down where you think the team's probably going to throw the football, it's really a mistake to kick Jarran Reed out here to defensive end because he's just not as good of a player out there. He should be and is primarily defensive tackle because he's a north-south kind of player and because he brings so much pressure. Now, the combined effect of this right here, with Jarran Reed and Chris Jones, is that together the offensive line is not going to be able to double and triple team both of these guys. What's probably going to happen if you have this alignment with Reed and Jones is that they're going to continue to double team Jones and that Jarran Reed is going to have more one-on-one matchups, and I would suspect that he would be able to break those down much easier than the double teams he usually gets in Seattle. Okay, so now if you roll over to the statistics page, you're going to see that Jarran Reed has excellent statistics. If you roll over to Pro Football Focus, you're going to see that his grades are down. But part of that is that he does get double and triple teamed so much when he's playing defensive tackle, and when he's out here at defensive end, he's just not as good because that's just not the kind of player he is. He's very effective against the run no matter where he lines up. His ability to get the quarterback goes way down when he gets to defensive tackle. All right, I've jabbered on and on about that. That's an important point to make about Jarran Reed and why I like it and what they should do with him. Now, let's talk about Frank Clark, okay? I have hated the Frank Clark deal since day one. I don't hate Frank Clark, the player. He works very hard. He celebrates very hard. He never quits on plays, and he's a good player. Any team in the NFL would love to have him. But 2 years ago, when the Kansas City Chiefs first signed this deal, I came out firmly, totally, 100% against this deal. I got so much pushback for several weeks from fans. I just kind of left it alone for a couple of years and let it play out. But I have hated this deal. The video is still up. I almost never pull my videos down. If anybody cares, you can go back and look at it from 2 off seasons ago. The Frank Clark deal, I didn't like. It was just too much money. They gave up a first-round draft pick, a second-round draft pick, and then they swapped third-round draft picks. So it was a huge trade. It's a lot of money. He's making insane amounts of money, obscene amounts of money right now to play defensive end. And the fact is that Frank Clark just is not good enough to merit A, that kind of a trade for draft picks, or B, that kind of money. He really should be making about $10 million a season, is about where his value would put him. Now, I know that's confusing because Frank Clark has made the Pro Bowl for each of the past 2 seasons. They're like, Ben, you must be an idiot. What are you talking about? But Frank Clark simply should not have been voted into either of those Pro Bowls. To his credit, Frank Clark celebrates other people's plays, other teammates' great plays, as much as he celebrates his own. But in all honesty, Frank Clark is a solid starter, slightly above average some years, and that's about it. He just should not be voted into those Pro Bowls. He usually lines up right out here. I'm going somewhere with this. I'm connecting it back to Jarran Reed. We'll talk about that in a second. But first of all, I have to talk about Frank Clark. He usually lines up here on the outside leverage of the tackle, right? And the book on Frank Clark from other NFL teams, when he's gotten to Kansas City, has been this. He's almost always going to attack out wide like this. Almost always. That is always, always, always the way that he's going to attack. And the truth is, though, against most tackles, he's just not fast enough to get around them. He has decent speed for defensive end, but he's just not fast enough to get around most tackles, even the more poor and inconsistent tackles in the NFL. On the flip side of that, Frank Clark typically is not strong enough. And I'm not saying he's a weak player, he's a strong player. He typically is not strong enough to actually push the tackles back into the quarterbacks. He's just not that big. He's somewhere in the 265, 270 neighborhood, depending on what time of year it is and which website you're looking at. He just does not have the strength and the body mass to push tackles back into the quarterback and get pressure that way. Now, Jarran Reed does. You see him lots of times, even when he can't beat the guard center combo, he's still pushing those guys back into the quarterback and getting pressure on the quarterback in that way. Frank Clark very rarely does that. He just doesn't have the body mass. So he does not have the speed on the outside to get away from the tackles. The book on Frank Clark is this. You simply, as a tackle, you simply carry him out here like this. And it's almost like a replay, a rewind. You can see it every single time you turn on the tape here with Frank Clark. Tackles just push him out behind the quarterback, and the quarterback simply steps up into his throw the way he would normally like to do. The quarterback just almost rarely, very rarely, feels any pressure from Frank Clark because he's just not fast enough. You know, there's quite a few edge rushers out there in the NFL who they may not be very good at stopping the run, but when you talk about the quickness to get on the outside edge and get around tackles, they have that quickness. Frank Clark does not have that. There are other guys like J.J. Watt who are just big and massive, and even if they don't beat the tackle to the outside, they have the ability to just bull rush the tackle straight into the quarterback, and Frank Clark doesn't have that either. Now, the only real criticism I have here of Frank Clark, and again, this is all going to come across as criticism, but the only real criticism I have of him is that he has not developed an inside move either. A lot of times, if you're just not quick enough, if teams want to funnel you outside as a defensive end, the thing to do to develop your game is to develop an inside move. And Frank Clark simply just has not been able to develop an inside move either. A spin move, a swim move, and any kind of move. He just has not ever developed that either. So he doesn't have the speed around the edge. He doesn't have the strength to bull rush, and he doesn't have the inside move to curl back to the inside. Now, say, why does he keep getting voted into the Pro Bowl for these past 2 seasons? Well, it's really because he's on TV a lot. He's a flashy player. He's a loud player. He's an excitable player. He's a good player. He's not a Pro Bowl player. And a lot of these guys that are voting for Pro Bowl, a lot of these folks just simply aren't watching video. They're watching games. That's for whatever reason they have a Pro Bowl vote. And that's why you see a lot of inconsistent Pro Bowl voting. And it's not just Frank Clark. You see it with other players in other positions. And he simply does not have anything that allows him to consistently get pressure on the quarterback. Now, listen, you may go to a website, you may see where he gets X number of pressures and he ranks certain number in the league in pressures. When you actually break down the video, I don't know how they're counting pressures, but when you actually break down the video, you see that he does not consistently get pressure on the quarterback the way some of these other top rushers do. And you can name probably 20 or 25 of them who consistently get pressure on the quarterback. One of them is named Chris Jones, who on his very team, you just see that he does not consistently, Frank Clark does not consistently get pressure on the quarterback, and that's really the biggest reason he was brought in. He's solid against the run. He gets some pressure on the quarterback. He just does not have any particular asset that allows him to have the value where he should have been traded for 2 draft picks. That's why I said it 2 off seasons ago. He's making an insane amount of money. I forget if he's in the top 15 or the top 20 highest paid players in the NFL this season. And I think maybe he's the second highest paid defensive player in the league this season. Just obscene numbers. And he just does not have any of that. He does not have the ability to get pressure on the quarterback. And that's one reason why, over the past 2 years, the defensive line has been fine, but it hasn't been better. Like you would think if you bring a guy in for tons of money and a couple of draft picks, that the defensive line would actually be better, and it hasn't been. And the reason is because Frank Clark, really, when he was in Seattle, this is something else you can go back and see on film. When he was in Seattle, a lot of his pressure on the quarterback was brought around by scheme. And I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. Frank Clark is really at his best when he gets to do twists or stunts, whichever way you want to call them, and he gets to curl back to the inside using the blocks of other players and the kind of the confusion from other players. A lot of Frank Clark's sacks and pressures over the years really come from just the twists and the stunts. And you saw that in Seattle. You saw that in the Super Bowl against Tampa Bay. His sack early in the game off Tom Brady was exactly that. It was a stunt to the inside. I forget what other player he was working the 2-man game with. That's why he got that sack. You say, well, he really steps up in the big games. You know, that has kind of been overdone as well. Yeah, some of you guys are going to hate me here, but that has been overdone as well, okay? In the AFC Championship game, Buffalo Bills, when Frank Clark got us 2 sacks, and you know, everybody was talking about, wow, this guy's really stepping up, this guy's really doing great. He was almost, in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback, he was almost a non-factor for the first 3 quarters. It was late in the 3rd quarter when Frank Clark finally got his first sack. Kansas City was already up by something like 18 points. I forget. They were up by a lot at that point. The game was not completely over by NFL standards, but largely it was over. Kansas City was going to win that game. Frank Clark wasn't even the first person there. I forget on that sack if it was Okafor or Chris Jones late in the 3rd quarter of the Buffalo Bills game, who actually got to the quarterback first and basically chased the quarterback back into where Frank Clark was coming on the outside. Same thing when you get over to the 4th quarter. Frank Clark picks up sack number 2 again. The game is largely over. Kansas City is up by something like 12 points or 15 points. And again, Frank Clark was not the primary rusher on the play. It was either Chris Jones or Okafor, again, who got pressure on the quarterback and again chased the quarterback over into where Frank Clark was rushing on the outside. And so, you know, again, I'm being brutal here and I know it, but the Frank Clark deal has been an awful deal. And, you know, Josh Fan put out a very short article, but a very good article questioning if you win a lot, does it cover up for or make up for bad contracts? And one of the ones I think he mentioned was the Frank Clark deal. And I don't want to steal all the thunder from Josh Fan's article, but, you know, when you win, and I alluded to this several weeks ago, when you win, it kind of covers up everything, even if a deal was good or bad. I would much rather personally, over these past 2 seasons, have had that cap space that I was paying Frank Clark, and I would much rather have had that 1st round pick and that 2nd round pick than I would to have had Frank Clark. I would certainly rather, as we're heading into 2021 and 22, I would rather have the results of those 2 draft picks, which again, you don't know who they would have been, but I would rather have had a shot at those 2 draft picks. I would rather have my $25 million in cap space in 21 instead of having Frank Clark on the team. It's not that Frank Clark has been bad. He has not been bad. He has contributed. He has been solid. He's a solid starter there at defensive end. He deserves to be on the football field. He deserves to be on the football field a lot, but that's where it stops. He should not have been voted into these Pro Bowls. And the point I'm going to make with all of this, though, I said I was going to bring it back around to Jarran Reed, and that's this. The book on Frank Clark is you just funnel him around to the outside, funnel to the outside. He cannot, with strength, push you into the quarterback. He cannot, with an inside move, beat you back to the inside. What he can do, though, consistently, is just keep going around to the outside. And if by chance, like in the AFC title game, we saw it twice late in the game when Kansas City was basically just pinning their ears back and gang rushing the entire Buffalo Bills offensive line. If by chance somebody else on the Chiefs defensive line pressures the quarterback and they curl back out, they're going to run into Frank Clark. And that's the point. And with Jarran Reed here now, defensive tackle, this is on passing downs, with Chris Jones and Jarran Reed creating, in theory, tons and tons of pressure up the middle, it is going to make these quarterbacks step back out, and Frank Clark is going to be waiting there as well. And I think, even though I hate the Frank Clark deal, I have despised it for 2 years. I said this right when they first did it, before he ever stepped on the field for Kansas City. Even though I hate the Frank Clark deal, he's on the team for another season. That is going to happen. You're just not going to let him go because the dead cap hit us too much. There's no point in trying to do anything else but keep him on the team for this season. If that continues to happen, Frank Clark comes in on the outside and Jarran Reed and Chris Jones pushing in the middle, it should make for a perfect bit of pressure. Jarran Reed should be the perfect piece to the puzzle here, either in being able to go one-on-one against a guard or a center, assuming that they keep doubling Chris Jones, or if they bring in more pressure here, they maybe use a running back here to kind of block this pressure right here. That's going to be a ton of pressure pushing, and Frank Clark is going to have more chances here on the outside. That's all in theory, but I really, really like this Jarran Reed addition here. I really, really like that. One more thing, two more things, and we're done for the day. I know this is getting to be a long video. You're still deep here at defensive tackle. I think it would be amazing, awesome. I would really be impressed if they would shop around Derek Nottie here. I don't think the Chiefs are going to be able to keep Derek Nottie in the 21 offseason. I don't think they're going to re-sign him. I think he's going to be able to make more money elsewhere than what they're going to be willing to pay him, considering that they already have Chris Jones and Saunders and Wharton on the team, and they might even be able to bring back Jarran Reed. It would make a lot of sense if they could pick up a draft pick for Derek Nottie, maybe a third rounder. It would make a lot of sense if they could trade him away. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to keep everybody here. I don't think at all that they're going to trade Derek Nottie away. Derek Nottie is outstanding against the run in 2020. He had his best season ever. He wasn't dominant against the run, but he was a major disruption against the run. So even if they keep him, the price is right. There's no reason not to keep him other than that you are looking ahead and seeing, hey, he's probably not going to be on the team past 21 because we're just not going to be able to keep putting that kind of money into defensive tackle. He's going to be able to hit the free agent market and make more than we want to pay him. It would make a lot of sense to trade Derek Nottie away just because you have so many bodies right here at defensive tackle and you already know that you're not going to pay him moving forward. It would make a lot of sense if you could trade him away. Could you get a third-round draft pick for him? I don't know. I have no clue. The price is right. A lot of teams right now are scrapping for people at different position groups. They don't have money to pay anybody in free agency right now at the $5, $10, $12 million level. Somebody might be willing to trade for Derek Nottie right now and then have him at defensive tackle moving forward, a guy who is a major disruption in the running game. Still gets no pressure on the quarterback at all, but he's a major disruption in the running game. Even if the Chiefs don't trade Derek Nottie, and I really don't think that they're going to, he can step in on running downs and Jarran Reed can step out. You would have then three major bodies right there. And I haven't even talked about Wharton yet. I really love Wharton. He's a guy who maybe could move out the defensive end. Even if not, he'll be right there in the mix, getting snaps at defensive tackle. I really love Wharton. Can you imagine, though, the big bodies that Kansas City could put out there on running downs? They could put Jarran Reed out here at defensive end. They could have Jones and Noddy on running downs right here at defensive tackle. They could put Wharton out here at the other defensive end position. This would be on running downs. And by the way, even though Wharton and Reed are big, they are not slow. They are fast. Same thing with Jones. And Derek Noddy, even though he's big, he's fast enough to get after it in the running game. This could be a could be a dominant team against the run just because of the sheer size that they present and the quickness. And I think it can be improved defensive line in the passing game as well and getting pressure on the quarterback. Now, that's all in theory. Reed may get on the field and he may not fit. He may not be comfortable. He may have trouble with the scheme. He may just not be as motivated as we would all like to see him be. He may get injured. There are all kinds of things that can happen. But in theory, if Reed is healthy, based on what we've seen in Seattle, we've actually seen him beat offensive lineman. We've actually seen him go guard, center, push. We have seen that. This isn't just him getting the benefits of a scheme like we've seen other players. This is actually him. We've seen him doing that. I think we can see more of that in Kansas City. And I think that he's going to be very good for Kansas City moving forward. We'll have more defensive line videos in the future, probably after the draft. We'll discuss this further. One other quick thing I want to do. I don't have a professional setup, and I know it. This is just kind of a down-home country setup. One of the best things that I've added, though, recently has been this money right here. I absolutely love it. You can see it right here in the background. I've got different kinds of money all over the place. This particular money, it's about the size of real money. I'll zoom in there and let you see it. This comes from a place called Rocco's Store. It's shaped like real money. It's about the size of real money. It's actually made of vinyl. And I love this stuff. I use it all over the place. You've seen me use it several times. It is by far the best looking thing I have in any of my videos. If any of you guys are interested, it doesn't come with magnets. I take these and I put them on a wood base with magnets, and I use it to illustrate all kinds of things that I need to talk about with contracts and money. If any of you guys are interested in buying any of this stuff, it's very affordable. Got a good price on it. You can get other things too. Some of it's a whole lot less professional than the stuff I use. But I encourage you to go by Rocco's Store. It's on the internet. You can look it up and find money just like this. I told Rod Selby that I would give him a shout out. So there it is. Thank you very much. All right. We've jabbered enough about this. We're over 30 minutes now. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.